Hey everyone, and welcome to this explainer. Let's just dive right into this because we are looking at an absolutely fascinating transformation today. Imagine going from being completely exhausted, overweight, and literally unable to run a 12-minute mile to achieving the top 1% of human health in just 2 years. We're talking about hitting a biological aging pace of 0.62. Now that is the exact same number that tech millionaires are hitting with unlimited budgets. But here's the real kicker. This wasn't achieved by just throwing a ton of money at the problem. No, it was achieved entirely through a radical shift in methodology. In fact, trying to just buy health, that was actually the first massive roadblock. $2 million? That's the famous annual price tag of tech entrepreneur Brian Johnson's super intensive health protocol. The author of our source material tried to blindly copy that exact famously expensive routine, basically thinking, he could just download someone else's perfect health. And guess what? No way. It was a massive mistake that completely backfired. So, here is our quick roadmap for today's explainer. We're going to cover 5 main things. First, the perfect protocol trap. Second, training the 5 pillars. Third, mastering the circadian rhythm. Fourth, data, bottlenecks, and systems. And finally, number 5, the human element.
All right, let's jump straight into section 1, the perfect protocol trap, and look at exactly why blind copying just doesn't work.
Take a look at this quote straight from the source. I was following the most expensive protocol on the planet, and my numbers were actually getting worse. By copying that super rigid multi-million-dollar routine, the author's blood work actually tanked. Seriously, he ended up deficient in iron and vitamin B12, his testosterone started dropping, and his inflammation was actually really high, despite eating what most would consider perfectly healthy food.
And this brilliantly illustrates what we call the single vector problem. This happens when you try to fix just one health marker in complete isolation, completely ignoring the cascading side effects on your interconnected physiological systems. For example, the author started doing these really long runs. Now, that single vector improved his cardiovascular health for sure. His HRV spiked beautifully. But the cascading side effect? The oxidative stress from all those long runs completely destroyed his hormones and just tanked his testosterone. You see, it's like a giant puzzle. You really can't fix one thing without looking at the whole picture.
That brings us right to section 2, training the 5 pillars, where we learn to train our weaknesses.
Because this single vector problem doesn't just happen with our blood work. It happens in the gym too. We all fall into this trap where we only train the things we're already naturally good at, right? But there are actually 5 core areas of physical health: strength, muscular endurance, speed, cardiovascular endurance, and flexibility. The author was a prime example of this trap. He could lift 1,200 pounds across his main lifts. He could bench press 225 pounds for 25 reps. But his endurance was essentially zero. He literally couldn't run a 12-minute mile. True health means being really honest with yourself and actively attacking your weakest pillar, not just polishing your strongest one.
But remember the trap. If you try to train absolutely everything at 100% intensity all the time, you're going to overtrain and break down. So how do you actually structure this? Well, the author built this brilliant 90-day seasonal rotation. Check this out. Winter is for building muscle and muscular endurance. Spring focuses on VO2 max and speed. Summer is pure strength. And fall is dedicated to cardiovascular endurance and HRV. This rotating cycle prevents overtraining and builds incredibly well-rounded fitness, all while actually maintaining the gains you made from the previous seasons. It's super smart.
Let's shift gears now to section 3, mastering the circadian rhythm, which goes way beyond just your sleep.
We really need to completely dispel this massive misconception that your circadian rhythm just means going to sleep at the exact same time every night. It is so much more than that. What's really interesting is the seesaw dynamic of your circadian rhythm. It literally dictates your hormones, your fat burning, and your cognitive sharpness. And it all comes down to this contrast. Your body demands high stress, a cortisol spike, and active digestion in the morning so that it can safely drop into a low-stress, pure recovery mode at night. If you don't intentionally spike your stress in the morning, it's going to spike at night and absolutely destroy your sleep.
So, to control that seesaw, you use these 3 primary signals. First up, exercise. You absolutely must spike that morning stress early. And here is a highly actionable micro takeaway for you. Even on a rest day, just do 1 minute of burpees or hop on an assault bike for a few minutes just to trigger that crucial morning cortisol spike. Second is light. You gotta get morning sunlight or use a 10,000 lux lamp and then strictly switch to warm, dim tones at night. And third, food. Your body digests efficiently in the morning, not at night. So swap your heavy dinner for a heavy breakfast
and try to stop eating at least 5 hours before bed.
Okay, let's move along to section 4, data, bottlenecks, and systems. We're going to explore automated daily habits.
Knowing what to do is one thing, but actually executing it intelligently without completely burning out requires building systems that remove friction. This right here is the continuous methodology loop that makes those high-end health protocols actually work. Measure, interpret, synthesize, and iterate. Remember how the author failed by just copying someone else's protocol? The secret to those top-tier routines is that every single decision is built from personal data. You have to build your decisions from your own data loop, not from what some tech billionaire happens to be doing.
When you actually look at your data, you have to pinpoint your specific bottleneck and just ignore all the other noise. Let's look at the author's comparison. 2 years ago, his bottleneck was high body fat. So the fix was a caloric deficit, cardio, and a ton of water. But later on, the bottleneck shifted to tanked testosterone. So the fix became less cardio, heavy lifting, and zinc and boron supplements. If he had tried to fix 50 things at once, he would have optimized absolutely nothing. You got to identify your top constraint, attack it for 90 days, and then reevaluate.
But how on earth do you execute this daily without your health routine completely consuming your entire life? Well, think about this number, 400. That is the astonishing number of hours you can save a year by spending just 1.5 hours on a Sunday prepping your meals. It literally completely removes daily decision fatigue.
Let's ground this system in reality for a second. This is exactly what that weekly prep looks like on a Sunday. 7 mason jars, preloaded with protein, creatine, and prebiotics. 7 daily portions of nuts and seeds. 7 vegetable soups. 21 boiled eggs ready to go with avocados, and your supplements sorted into a tin for 30 days. The whole shebang. You see, relying on pure discipline is actually kind of overrated. Removing the daily decisions is what really keeps you in the top 1% without losing your mind.
Which brings us perfectly to our final section, the human element. Let's look beyond raw willpower.
Because let's be real, even with the absolute best systems in a fridge full of perfectly prepped mason jars, raw willpower alone will inevitably fail you. We so often fall into what the author calls the robot fallacy. We try to build these protocols for theoretically perfect robots, waking up at exactly 5 a.m., eating perfectly measured meals completely alone in a room. And what happens? 3 weeks later, real life happens, and we quit. Contrast that with the human reality. The routines that actually stick are adaptable. They rely heavily on social accountability, and they actually allow for the joy of eating out with your friends.
And hey, if you don't believe in the power of the human element, the data speaks for itself. Environmental design and handshake deals with friends, like where you actually pay a penalty if you skip a routine, cause massive physiological changes. By moving in with his business partner and working with his team, the social accountability yielded incredible results. The author's HRV basically doubled from the 50s to 110, his partner Thomas went from the 90s to 155, and his director Taki doubled hers from the 40s to the 80s. And that was without even adding any cardio. It's wild. Who you surround yourself with literally changes your biology.
So let me ask you a highly practical question to really test this robot versus human theory. What happens to your routine if you embrace that human element, stay out late on a Saturday with friends, and you're only going to get, say, 5 hours of sleep? Does the whole protocol just fall apart? Do you just sleep in till noon to catch up?
Nope, you adapt. Here is the highly realistic late-night fix. You wake up at your normal time anyway. You get your morning sunlight to lock in that biological clock, you do a light walk or a very light session, and then you just take a 20 to 30-minute afternoon nap. Preserving the timing of your circadian rhythm is significantly more important than sleeping in to try and catch up on total hours. Yeah, you'll be tired for one day, but your rhythm stays perfectly intact.
So, as we wrap up this explainer today, I want to leave you with this final, somewhat provocative thought to take away. Are you building a health protocol for a theoretically perfect robot? Or are you building one for the beautifully messy human you actually are? This shift from isolated perfection to a sustainable, socially connected methodology is how you actually reach the top 1%. Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer, and I really hope you're eager to start building your own sustainable health journey.